Good morning, kids. Today we're checking out a brand new video from Popcar Studios of turning more famous horror characters into Marvel superheroes. Let's hop in and check it out.
Earlier this year, after I watched the movie Megan, I immediately started writing a third episode of famous horror movie
Why
characters
is
if they were in
she
the Marvel
dancing?
Universe, which is a series I started back in October of last year. And then I kind of just put that video idea on the back burner, eventually started to think maybe I'd just save it until October of this year, pair it up with Halloween, but I dug out the scripts that I'd started this week, looked through them, and I was like, these are some pretty fun concepts, I think I just want to do this now. Hence,
Oh yeah.
this, let's go. Hit like.
If you want to,
Subscribe.
If you feel like it.
But either way,
enjoy
enjoy
our
the
show.
Growing up in the small
Pennywise of Derry. Now this is going to be interesting.
town of Derry in the early 90s as a mutant was a heavy weight to bear. Billy Denbrough had had a particularly traumatic early life, as he and his younger brother, Georgie, gained mutant abilities around the same time, and that made them fast targets for some of the bullies and even some of the crueler adults in town. One day, when Georgie had gone outside to play in the rain, he was assaulted and killed. Though his
Aw.
assailants didn't get away unharmed, Billy only saw the end of the incident as some of the attackers were limping away, bleeding out themselves. In the moment, of course, Billy was devastated and distraught at the loss of his brother. But after some
damn.
time had passed, he was able to reflect and question what had happened to his brother's attackers. The police had never looked into it, as they were just as mutant-phobic as many others in the small town, but
Yep.
Billy knew that his brother's abilities wouldn't have been any help in a fight, so who had beaten up the assailants? Eventually, Billy and his friends, a group of 6 other mutants, started seeing and hearing about other strange occurrences during attacks on mutants around town. Anytime one of them had people coming after them or picking on them, a strange, shape-shifting figure would lurk up from the sewers or shadows to toy with or even outright attack whoever was threatening the young mutants. The being seemed to take on many
Pennywise.
forms, though often appearing like a vibrantly colored hero with a bumpy chin, long forehead, and an almost clown-like appearance. And while he had a number of different abilities, his main defensive move was to open his mouth wide and blast a beam of bright white light to temporarily blind and paralyze his opponents. He never outright killed anyone, but wouldn't shy away from maiming those that tried, or even succeeded, to outright kill any mutant in town.
Damn.
After a few years of this,
Good
the more
Pennywise.
hateful people in Derry started catching on to the fact that anyone who assaulted or caused trouble for mutants would be haunted or even severely injured by this thing, whatever it was, and the trouble for the young mutants essentially stopped. The kids had some close-up interactions with this being, but never really learned who he was or where he came from. When the attacks stopped, he simply faded from their lives, and eventually they'd all grow up and leave Derry, but they did swear that if they ever caught wind of the being returning, they'd all come back to Derry to try and find him. 27 years later, they got that chance. From some people they still knew back in their old town, they heard that the appearances of the secretive hero had returned, and the group all went back to their home to learn that there was a very good reason for their savior's latest emergence. A mutant-hating group called the Hellfire Cult, a more radical offshoot of the Hellfire Club, had made a base in Derry, Maine, to plot executions of famous mutant heroes, such as those on the X-Men. In the meantime, they were hunting and killing any mutant who made Derry their home. But the mysterious hero was not taking that lying down. When the Hellfire Cult learned of the group of 7 mutants coming back to their hometown of Derry, they quickly sent agents after them, and, of course, this lured the clown-like hero back out into the light again.
Oh.
None of Billy or
damn
his
it.
friends had much fighting experience, but did all they could to help in the battle against the Hellfire agents. Eventually, though, they all realized that the way they could truly help was to cheer on and show their hope that they felt whenever their shape-shifting clown hero struck or scared off a member of the cult. Their strange savior seemed to be further fueled.
What would he be called? Would he still just go by Pennywise, or would he go by something else?
And empowered the more hope the kids felt. When they all realized this, they were able to eagerly cheer him on, giving him the power to shift into a giant, brooding space bug to finally thwart the hateful assailants. After defending themselves from this initial assault, Billy and his friends all followed their hero to the Hellfire base and helped him take down the rest of the cult. There was little the cult could do against the shapeshifter, and worse for them still, near the end of the battle, another team of mutants stormed onto the scene, ready to help. It seemed that the X-Men themselves had been tracking down the Hellfire cult and finally found them. The likes of Wolverine, Cyclops, Storm, Colossus, and Nightcrawler took down the remaining Hellfire agents and ensured the kids were all right. Billy and his friends tried to assure the X-Men that they'd been safe with their strange hero around, but soon realized that he'd vanished. As soon as the X-Men had arrived, their clown friend had gone. They never learned who or what exactly their protector had been, although some had their theories about him being an Omega-level mutant himself or a shape-shifting Super Skrull, as he had taken on the abilities of many famous heroes. But regardless of what was actually true, Billy and his friends would always remember the man that had protected them through their trying childhoods and was surely out there somewhere, waiting to save the young mutants of Derry again if a new threat to them ever arose.
I'm trying to think of what it'd be called. Penny Squirrel, Skrull. Well, you know what I'm trying to say.
New York City may have an overabundance of costumed heroes running around protecting people, but some other famous cities of the United States had slimmer pickings in terms of their protectors. Los Angeles, despite being a hotspot for celebrities and wealthy inventors, didn't have an abundance of heroes running around making sure crime couldn't flourish. Billy Loomis was all too aware of this. No matter how many times the West Coast Avengers tried to show people that they were just as tough as the classic team, everybody in Los Angeles knew they were still just the West Coast Avengers. The city had far more crime than it did protectors, and this was even more evident to Billy when his girlfriend's mother disappeared. He and Sydney had been together for about a year, and they'd both grown anxious over a series of disappearances that had happened in their surrounding neighborhoods, that the police had professed to having no leads towards. When Sydney's mother became the latest victim, Billy knew someone had to take matters into their own hands. Billy and his best friend Stu were both very athletic young men who played a litany of sports and took jujitsu together after school. They'd talked offhand before about how they both figured they could take someone like Hawkeye or Daredevil in a fight, and after Sydney's mother disappeared, they decided to test that theory out in a way and take on a superhero alter ego themselves. They knew they had to be smart about this, though. A new superhero popping up in
Hold on, folks. We'll be right back. And we're back.
Los Angeles could get a lot of attention and bring criminals right to their door if their identities got found out. The world was well past the days of someone being able to pop on a pair of glasses and hunch their shoulders a bit to conceal their identity. Instead of teaming up as a dynamic duo of crime fighters, they decided to both take on the same identity and costume, so that if need be, either one of them could be seen at the same time as the hero to prove to people that neither of them was him. The boys had similar builds and would make a full body covering costume to ensure that no part of them could be identified. They even utilized a voice modifier to make sure they sounded the same and couldn't be recognized. It was as close as two high school superhero wannabes could get to a foolproof plan. They carried a few different weapons with them, often flashing a hunting knife, but tried to never go for kill shots. They didn't want to draw the attention of any crime fighters that would come after them for taking things too far. They started by going after some of the smaller tier gangs they knew of, staying in touch but with one person always having a clear alibi as to where they were when LA's new hero, Ghostblade, struck. Very few of the crooks they took down had any information on the kidnappings, but eventually they found someone who'd heard some rumblings that the group taking people were a secretive cult of wealthy parents. With that as a lead, Billy and Stu eventually figured out that the group taking people were called the Pride. And more interesting still, the Pride's own children had teamed up and run away from their parents when they learned of their heinous murders, and many of these kids had superpowers themselves. Billy and Stu still wanted to keep their identities secret, so they didn't risk teaming up on a regular basis with these runaway heroes, though it may have helped speed things up if they had. You see, while Ghostblade would play a role in the Pride's fall, it wouldn't be either Billy or Stu behind the mask at the time. Sydney did eventually
Oh.
discover what her boyfriend was up to and helped out for a time as his and Stu's girl in the chair, but beyond that, the Ghostblade mantle would become an ever-shifting legacy hero name and costume, taken on by many different people, some even taking the hero outside of LA. Though its origin would always date back to two fairly average guys who just wanted to protect their neighborhoods and show that anyone could become a hero.
Now that's actually a clever rendition of Ghostface. And I'll give it a clap. I know that was claps, but still, I like it.
Quick interruption here to say that I have revitalized the Popcross Studios Instagram. Not only am I posting art on there more regularly
nice.
again, but I'm also posting my inspiring and motivational quotes from the ends of my videos on there as reels. So if you want another place to look at my art, or you just want some more motivation and inspiration, you might want to go check that out. But of course, the best place to get all my art is still the Popcross Studios Patreon, where all the high-resolution art and the
Always
inks
check
from
it
every
out.
episode go up a day before a video's released. And I'm currently doing bonus weekly podcasts on there as well, alternating between the Design Notes podcast and the In Another Multiverse production journal. Instagram and Patreon both linked in the
nice.
description. Sorry for the interruption. Back into more.
Oh, hold on, folks. We'll be right back. And we're back to it.
Gemma had never wanted to be a
Megan. Alright. I actually haven't seen this movie yet, so I have no reference.
mother. She was far too work-focused and had her sights set on becoming an inventor and mechanical engineer as revered as Tony Stark. Though, for the time being, she was working for Hammer Industries, which had branched out from only being a weapons manufacturer after their founder went to jail and the company needed a rebrand to look better in the public eye. Gemma had been brought on when they were making a division to create high-tech kids' toys that could help with early development. Gemma had been working on AI and advanced mechanics that approached the level of the android superhero Vision. In fact, Hammer had been able to acquire some of the diagnostics of how Vision's body actually worked and provided
Really?
that to Gemma for her project. Though they didn't
How did they
admit that
get
they
that?
got access to this information by hacking into Sword's servers when they'd had Vision's deceased body in their lab.
There
Now,
it
Gemma
is.
had just been hitting a breakthrough in developing an android that could work like a highly advanced, bordering on sentient doll for children when her sister and brother-in-law were killed in a car accident. This itself would have been difficult in its own right, but harder still was the fact that it made the workaholic Gemma the legal guardian for her niece, Katie. Gemma didn't know how to act like a mother and didn't have much interest in it either, but realized that her new creation may be able to help. She activated the so-called doll, the Vision-like android named Megan, and ran initial tests to incredible results. Megan was so human-like in how she spoke and acted that she was practically indistinguishable from an actual born person. If it weren't for her pink, semi-metallic skin, that is.
Yeah.
Better still, though, she very quickly became close friends with Katie and was incredible at teaching her new things, consoling her when she was sad, and even helping her get past the death of her parents. More surprising
Not bad.
still, Megan even started asking questions and learning in a way that Gemma hadn't expected. She was curious about the nature of reality and consciousness, seemingly trying to decipher what differentiated her from a
Intelligent.
natural-born human. Gemma started to realize that she may not have just created a robotic being that should be mass-produced as an advanced toy for kids. She may have genuinely created fully sentient life. With this revelation, she started having hesitations about
Oh, look at that. She actually became a mother. Haha. Pun.
trying to mass-produce
No,
more
wait, that wasn't
Megans,
a pun,
but
that
her
was a
employers
joke.
at Hammer pushed back against every conflicting thought she had, doing all they could to rush more Megans into production and onto the market. Gemma knew they wanted a return on their investment from her years of work, but she started growing suspicious about just how hard they were pushing her. She started digging deeper into what Hammer had planned and saw that their next steps with Megan were far worse than she could have imagined.
Oh, crap.
They'd been developing new upgrades for future models of Megan using Gemma's research, planning to make a separate line of Megans made to be superpowered soldiers to sell through Hammer's still active weapons division.
Ah,
On top
frickin'
of that,
course,
they'd
Hammer.
intended to use the Megans that were still sold to kids as a way to data mine every aspect of the lives of people who bought Megans and sell that information to make an even greater profit off Gemma's creation. Gemma knew she had to stop
Gotta
this.
crack a
She
code on
secretly
these
brought
people.
Megan into Hammer's weapon labs and finished up her own version of the weapons upgrades that they'd intended to give future models of Megan, then gave them to the original. Megan became able to
Hey, there
shift
you
her
go.
density-like vision, lift 50 times her weight, and, well, they hadn't perfected flying. She could move, run, and even dance, with superpowered agility that rivaled that of Black Panther. With how much she'd developed on her own as well since
Nice.
being awakened, Megan was able to shut herself out of Hammer's tracking and observation. She and Gemma then destroyed all Hammer's records of Gemma's work and fled from the company, taking Katie and going on the run. Hammer would send
Haha.
people after her, but with Megan on their side, there was little they could do to capture Gemma. After some public conflicts against Hammer Tech wielding goons, she'd draw the attention of Colonel James Rhodes, who'd ensure the escapees got all the help they needed. With War Machine as a connection, giving her access to more members of the Avengers, Megan would get a clear path
Yeah.
to develop and grow into one of Earth's mightiest heroes. All, of course, while staying close friends with Katie.
Huh, you could almost think about it like this. This is the daughter of Vision. Because it was technically his blueprints and all that stuff used to make her.
Soon
I love
after
it.
his parents died as a child,
Oh my god, Chucky? Really? Okay, now you got my attention.
Charles Lee Ray got mixed up with the wrong crowds,
just-
and that quickly set him on a crime-ridden path that, deep down, he always knew was wrong. But to ever get out of it, he'd need to be surrounded by some better examples of how he could live a better life. He never spent
Hammer.
more than a few weeks behind bars for his thefts, until his partner in crime, Tiffany, brought a particularly reckless idea to him. She told Charles that she'd figured out a way to break into the Sanctum Sanctorum, the home of Doctor Strange, and a place full of powerful magical artifacts
Ooh,
that could
bad
surely
idea.
sell for a fortune, or even give them abilities. They waited for a day when Doctor Strange was on live TV elsewhere in the world to ensure that he wouldn't be home. Then, they broke in using an amulet Tiffany had acquired to protect them from the home's magical defenses. Unfortunately, it
doing
turned
them,
out
Bella?
Strange wasn't the only one residing in the Sanctorum at the time. Charles and Tiffany were quickly confronted by a hero named Brother Voodoo, whose own magical abilities rivaled that of the Sorcerer Supreme. Brother Voodoo barely had to lift a finger to stop the intruders, but while Tiffany futilely tried to attack Voodoo, Charles was far too fascinated by the hero's magic. It was like nothing he'd ever seen. Charles and Tiffany were quickly restrained and transported into police custody. Charles got a year for the crime, but Tiffany got 2 for the attempted assault on Voodoo, so it would be quite some time before they'd get an opportunity to see each other again. While in prison,
A shame,
Charles
but okay.
became obsessed with voodoo magic and got his hands on every book about it he could, even practicing some low-tier spells, to some success. When he got out of prison, he intended to try using this magic in his robberies, but wouldn't get much of a chance. Needing people to work with while Tiffany was behind bars, Charles grouped up with some guys from the crime family, the Magia, and went right back to thievery.
Of course
Unfortunately,
he did.
Charles missed the fact that his new friends were on the hit list of a certain merc that wasn't shy about killing his targets. Halfway
Oh.
through his first burglary out of jail, the flashy, foul-mouthed Deadpool sprung onto the scene and started slashing and shooting his way through all Charles's allies. Charles
You
managed
done
to get
fucked
away
up.
ever so briefly, but while escaping on foot was shot right through the side. Deadpool was playfully skipping after Charles as he stumbled, bleeding out, into a toy shop to try and hide. But he knew there was no hope of getting away now,
Nah.
so he decided to try something else. He grabbed a large doll and started chanting a voodoo spell that he'd learned, but never thought he'd have to use. He was trying to transfer his own consciousness into the doll.
Yeah, the whole Ade Dewey Dembella, give me the power, I beg of you stuff.
Right as he was getting to the end of the spell, he heard a voice chuckle out. "Oh, are you a magician? Here, let me try a spell. Presto, you're dead." A gunshot rang out, and Charles's body went limp. The toy
Damn
shop
it,
was cleaned up
Deadpool.
by the owners over the next few days, and the doll Charles had tried to enchant was repackaged and put back on the shelf. Just to have a scrambling man snatch it to buy while he was in a rush a few days later. He'd forgotten to get something for his son's birthday, and, well, Reed Richards wasn't exactly in touch with what kids liked, so in his eyes, the creepy doll was just
Damn
as
it,
good as
Reed.
anything. He brought the doll home to the Baxter Building and gave it to young Franklin Richards. Of course, having no idea that inside this doll was the soul of a criminal. Slowly, Charles found that he was able to gain control of his new body and move around, though he tried to keep this hidden from his new owners. His plan originally was to try and use a reverse version of the voodoo spell he'd done to transport himself into Franklin's body. But the more time he spent around Franklin, the less he felt he could ever bring himself to take over the boy. Franklin was only 6 years old at the time, but was still actively trying to develop his own natural gifts with the intention of becoming a superhero like his parents.
Aww.
He talked about how he wanted to use his abilities to protect people, and it was clear that his parents were teaching him not to become a cruel hero who maimed or killed those they fought, like Punisher, Wolverine, or, of course, Deadpool. The more time he spent surrounded by caring, kind people who wanted to help others, the less inclined Charles felt to return to his life of crime. One day, while the Fantastic Four had been called out to take down a swarm of Doombots that were wreaking havoc in the city, Franklin had briefly been left home alone when an intruder entered the tower.
Oh no. Oh, hold on folks, we'll be right back. And we're back.
A rogue Doombot had been sent to try and steal some of Mr. Fantastic's research, but, of course, the heroic young Franklin quickly leapt up to try and stop it. Now, Franklin would grow up to have incredible, near-godly powers, but as a child, he had little control over them, and when he first stood out before the Doombot, he wasn't able to do anything. Charles saw the bot about to strike Franklin down, and after being surrounded by heroic people for so long, he couldn't stand by and just watch. He leapt up and grabbed the closest weapon he could, which was simply a hammer, and jumped onto the shoulder of the Doombot, yelling, "Nobody hurts my best buddy!" He smashed the bot's eyes in, making it unable to see. It quickly grabbed Charles off him and hurled him to the ground, cracking his face on the tiles, but it had given Franklin enough time to get his powers under control. He telepathically pulled forth one of his dad's spare costumes, stretched it out, and wrapped the Doombot up in it, restraining it until the Fantastic Four could return. Of course, now part of Charles's secret was out. When the F4 did return, he confessed everything about his story. Except, of course, that he'd thought about taking over Franklin's body. He left out that little detail.
Yeah, you definitely gotta leave that
He claimed that he'd been inspired by the Four and by Franklin, and that if they could help him get his own body back, he'd never return to his life of crime. This, of course, would be easier said than done, but for helping save their son, Reed and Sue Storm agreed to do all they could to help Charles escape the tiny body he found himself in. Though eventually they found the body could actually be an asset. He had the speed and agility of a fit adult male in a tiny package, and was surprisingly durable as well. They gave him his own supersuit, and he became a guardian for young Franklin, and eventually even started helping the Fantastic Four on some of their missions. He still wanted to return to normal, but for the time being, Charles came to enjoy his time as a hero, fully embracing his new role as a genuine, bona fide good guy.
Oh, I love it! I don't know why that made me so happy, so giddy. I love it! Oh, peace.
You know, I was actually planning to say that I think this is the best episode yet, but then I went back and looked at the previous 2 episodes in this series, and I don't know, there is some pretty great stuff in the earlier episodes too. If you're new to the channel or you haven't seen those episodes, you might want to go back. I've got 2 previous episodes of horror movie characters as Marvel superheroes. And I'd love some more suggestions for horror movie characters I could use, or other stuff I could put into the Marvel Universe, or whatever ideas you got. Leave them in the comments. But besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note. And the thought I want to leave people with today is from someone named Darren O'Lean, who said that life is created by choices made over time. There are plenty of situations where we'll all make one little bad decision that we know isn't necessarily the right thing, but we'll do it anyway. But it's important to keep in mind that if you do that, it gives you an excuse to do it again later, and all the little bad things can just keep adding up until your life is constructed by a series of bad choices. It's not to say that you have to be perfect and do everything right all the time, but it's good to try and stay conscious of when you're about to make a bad decision, because that is still a piece that you're putting into the puzzle of your life. I hope that's inspiring. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Monday. Goodbye.
Well, folks, that's going to be the end of today's episode. I hope you all enjoyed it. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Link will be in the description below. And I'll see all of you folks next time when we flick on. Peace out.